moje ime Borut, ko me ne zna, i stvarno mi je, ali stvarno je čast, u stvari, da budem potpuno iskren, da najavim prvo predavanje današnje, predavanje gospodina Stivena Helera iz Njujorka, čuvenog teoretičara, pisca, grafičkog dizajnera, urednika, dugogodišnjeg New York Timesa, art direktora, naravno, mislim, čoveka kog je nemoguće zaobići kada se bavimo istorijom, teorijom i savremenom tekstualnom produkcijom u grafičkom dizajnu, ali i obrazovanjem. Stiven Heler radi na Fakultetu Visual Arts u New Yorku, na master studijama. Ima uspešnu dugu karijeru kao predavač i učitelj na neki način. Neću dužiti, nego jednim gromkim aplauzom da pozdravimo gospodina Stivena Helera, koji će odnositi. Koje će održati predavanje Oh, say can you see, koje stavio O u Obamino ime.
Thank you. I feel like I'm sitting down to play the piano. How many of you voted for Barack Obama?
Here.
Yeah, there's one at least, thank you. It's been a year since Obama was elected president, to many of our great happinesses. It's been a very tough year for the president, not the least of which because our country is very polarized between right and left, Republican and Democrat, and independents as well. So I'm going to take you and me and Mirko back to the days when things were a little better in the U.S., when Barack Obama was actually running for president, when there was hope in the air and in the hearts, and many people gathered together to work for his campaign in such a way that hadn't been seen for quite a while. And a lot of it actually had to do with the graphic manifestations of the campaign. Unusually, because as you will see, American political graphics in the mainstream has never been high on the standards list. So I call this talk, Oh, Say Can You See? Who Put the O in the Obama Campaign? A couple of song titles there. Contemporary Political Graphic Design, which would not make a very good song title. And Our Colors, of course. But what I want to show you before I get into a little bit more of the history of political graphics, and then, of course, what preceded and led up to Obama's graphic signature, is the first American commercial ever run on television for a presidential candidate.
I'm for president, I'm for president, I'm for president, I'm for president. You like Ike, I like Ike, everybody likes Ike for president. Hang out the banner, beat the drum, we'll take Ike to Washington. We don't want John or Harry, let's do nothing just Ike. Let's get in step with the guy step, get in step with Ike. You like Ike, I like Ike, everybody likes Ike for president. Hang out the banner, beat the drum, we'll take Ike to Washington. We got to get where we are going. Travel day and night for president. Let away, go the other way. We'll all go with Ike. You like Ike, I like Ike. Everybody likes Ike for president. Hang out the banner, beat the drum. We'll take Ike to Washington. We'll take Ike to Washington.
Now is the time for all good Americans to come to the aid of their country. Vote for Eisenhower.
Yes, I was inspired as well. And Mirko did not do this commercial. What's interesting about it is it broke with tradition. It was, as I said, the first political commercial on television, a very early, a nascent form of television. It began it triggered an entire genre of commercials that have come up to this very day, now dirty trick commercials. It was pretty naive by the standards that we hold today. The animation was crude, the jingle was fun, it didn't take any pot shots at his opponent, except in the case where they showed the donkeys. For those of you who don't know, there are two animals that represent the political parties in the United States. The grand old pachyderm, the elephant for the GOP or the Republican Party, and the donkey for the Democratic Party, which could be construed as an ass, but we just like to think of it as a donkey. And so you saw those donkeys leaving Washington while the pachyderm is coming into Washington. This is basically the way political graphics have looked for ages, even going back to before the turn of the 20th century. Always the colors red, white, and blue. Everybody owns red, white, and blue in the United States. It's not trademarked, but it represents America. Usually you just want to show the name and the face of the candidates. So in this case it was John F. Kennedy. Just a quick anecdote. When I was 10 years old, Kennedy had just been nominated for the presidency, and I met him in Washington, D.C., and he gave me a button. Not one of these that's here, but it looked like that poster with him and Lyndon Johnson. Anyway, this is the standard fare for design, which is pretty anti-design, for pretty neutral design. Every so often there'd be a slogan like the man for the 60s, or if I were 21, I'd vote for JFK, but most of the time it was pretty standard and lame. So I'm going to move on to the most recent president, past president. POTUS, by the way, stands for President of the United States, and that's what the Secret Service say in their wristwatches when they're protecting the president. And typographicus, it may be Greek or Latin, who knows? And the Bush typographic legacy is what I want to briefly talk about. George Bush is known for many things, and probably the least of them is typography. However, his people introduced a form of typographic communication which hadn't been seen in public perhaps since the Third Reich. And that was the use of big slogans behind and before the president at his various speaking engagements. He used beveled typefaces, all these computer-generated typefaces. Somebody had a Photoshop filter. There was always some sort of halo behind the typefaces. If he didn't have a halo, he used Optima in the worst way possible. And of course, these are the things that were used because he couldn't speak very well. So they served as captions to his verbiage. People listening to him wouldn't necessarily get the parsing of a sentence, but they could see that it was about compassion, or they could see that it was about cell prevention, stem cell prevention care. But thank heavens, 8 years later, he left office in our constitutional way that we have in America, and the typographic nightmare was over. And now I'd like to talk to you about kerning the candidates. Those of you who are graphic designers in the audience know that kerning is probably the most important thing you can do as a typographer, because you don't want those little embarrassing spaces between letters or words. So we'll start off with Baskerville, one of the classic typefaces. And this was used by Hillary Clinton in the primaries when she was running against Barack Obama and the others on the